Hi, I'm with Alan Gold here from NJ Leasing. How are you doing today?
I am well, thank you.
Awesome, awesome. So to start out, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'm a serial entrepreneur that spent most of my career involved in venture capital and finance, mostly debt products. I also had a fairly big career in the fashion industry for a while, but I transitioned from that into finance. And I saw an opportunity in 1984 to provide equipment financing to startup Silicon Valley companies. And I developed some programs that I felt I could underwrite, and I started a company called VentureLease and became a fairly significant player in the mid-80s in financing a lot of household names in the technology field. A lot of these companies had great concepts and ideas, and they were barely out of R&D. They might have just gone into beta. They certainly weren't making any money, and they were burning money very quickly, but they had very substantial investors behind them who were the companies that are now probably the household names in venture capital, but back in the mid-80s they were relatively small companies and as investors. And we invested in equipment for these R&D companies based upon the due diligence and the quality of the investors that they had, and also being able to sort of evaluate what the equipment we were financing would be worth in 1 year, in 2 years, and in 3 years. So, you know, if they hit the wall at the end of a year, how badly would we get hurt? If we hit the wall at the end of 2 years, how close to coming out, you know, and so we do this kind of analysis. So we were very successful. That field in leasing started to attract a lot of attention, therefore a lot of competition, and it wasn't fun anymore. And I'm big on fun, so in my business career, so we moved on. And because of my interest in metaphysics and mysticism and environmental issues, I decided that I would create a group of funds to provide financing to the environmental services industry, and clean up technologies, new technologies, pollution control, things of that nature, and also energy efficiency. In our energy efficiency business, we financed millions of dollars worth of, hundreds of millions of dollars worth of high-tech lighting of the type, or similar in some regards to the types of lighting that are used in cultivators today. Obviously it's evolved a great deal since then. And we finance cogeneration equipment. And so I left that industry and went on to do other things in the financial services. I owned a small investment bank and did structured finance deals, and more recently started a commercial lender, lending money to companies that couldn't get money from banks for working capital. And I came to the conclusion that the environment in the cannabis industry had a lot in common with the environment I was dealing with in the early stages of my career in venture leasing, and also, of course, my involvement in the environmental sector, especially lighting. Oh my God, you know, all of these pieces are coming together. What this industry needs is it needs a dedicated equipment finance company that can help these young companies grow. That's how we got here.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So what initially got you involved in cannabis? What inspired you to want to delve into the cannabis route?
My best friend when I was 17 gave me a tobacco and Lebanese or Afghani hashish joint cone that was about that big, you know, a chillum, I think we called them in the days. And you know that I was part of a cultural shift, you know, back in the late 60s and 70s, and you know, cannabis became, you know, part of our culture, part of our life, you know, part of, you know, our relationships. I mean, you know, probably the first time that I had sex, I was stoned, you know, and for a lot of other times, come to think of it, when I think back over many, many years. but you know, I've been a modest user of cannabis, although I did go through a stretch of deep spiritual exploration with lots of yoga and meditation at a time when cannabis and spiritual development were not really good friends. And there were a lot of judgments with a lot of spiritual organizations. You know, you cannot alter yourself with cannabis, it's bad for your spirit, and so on and so forth, most of which I feel has been debunked. Or, as one of my teachers likes to say, what can be wrong with something that more fully opens the heart?
Right.
So, and brings more love into the world, and you know, and that's my philosophy. But you know, I've been a modest user, you know, for many, many, many years, and I've also experimented medicinally with cannabis, both on myself, with my family, and with my dog, who currently has lymphoma, and we're treating him with chemo and steroids, but also with CBD oils, and and it seems to be helping him. It's certainly keeping him very vital, and hopefully, you know, we'll give him an extra couple of years of life. So, yeah. So, you know, it's just part of my lifestyle. You know.
So switching gears back to leasing, so what makes leasing so important for the cannabis business?
Well, let's approach it from more macro level. What makes leasing important as part of the economy, right? I mean, you know, there are 3 different ways that people get financing. They raise equity, which generally speaking is a very expensive way to raise capital, because whatever you give out in terms of stock, if you've got a growing company, it's going to cost you a lot of money to give away a piece of the action. They can get loans from banks, but banks typically do not do equipment loans as a separate function other than a sort of a line of credit. So when companies borrow money from banks, they have to obey the rules of the bank, which involves covenants and reporting and lots of other sort of issues, including having to have lunch with a very boring person once a month, your banker, and make nice noises to him. So there are a lot of strings involved in doing business with banks, but they are definitely out there. And generally speaking, their cost of money and the cost of their loans is less expensive than most leasing companies. But leasing is a solution for a lot of companies in a lot of industries, which allows a company to acquire equipment that they need in order to grow or to fulfill orders and increase their production without having to go through a lot of rigmarole, without a lot of conditions other than pay or die. People say, well, what does this long lease contract say? I says, it says pay or die. Yeah. You want to explain all the different ways that you can die? We can go into it in detail. But basically, that's what the contract says, right? And as long as people are able to make the monthly payments and they can demonstrate that they've got the cash flow to support acquiring the equipment, it's a fairly easy process. We do due diligence. We look at the company's financials. We look at their projections. We want to see what this piece of equipment is going to do for them. That gives us more comfort. We look at the value of the equipment. We evaluate what its resale value will be, you know, at the end of 1 year, 2 years, 3 years, and if it's a longer lease, a 4 or 5 year lease, you know, if things go bad, how likely are we going to be able to get out whole at different stages? And the cost of money is generally a factor of the quality of the company in terms of their cash flow and the type of equipment. So, you know, lighting equipment, you know, for example, which is generally speaking fixed to a building, and may not be in terribly good condition when you remove it 2 years later, is not as attractive, but doesn't mean it's not financeable. It's just not going to get the best rate. Whereas a piece of extraction equipment, distillation equipment, laboratory equipment, testing equipment, and things of that nature will retain a high level of value, and it's going to get a better lease rate. Leases are typically written with fair market, what we call fair market value purchase options, and this is very important in the cannabis industry. So a lease with a fair market value purchase option, which basically means that at the end of the term, let's say it's 3 years, if the lessee wants to keep the equipment, they have to purchase it from us. Now, that purchase value may, by agreement, be relatively nominal, and we will say not to be greater than 10% of its original cost. And very often it will be down 3, 4, 5, 6% of the cost. But the reason that you have to write these leases that way is so that they qualify with the IRS under their lovely Rule 280E. If you buy the equipment, the only thing, and it's production equipment, the only write-off that you can get is straight line depreciation. You cannot write off interest, you cannot get accelerated depreciation, but you can get straight line depreciation, which isn't nearly as attractive as writing off an entire lease payment. So it's very compelling for cannabis companies to lease equipment whenever they can, provided it's structured properly.
So, speaking with some of the people that you know in your circles in the cannabis industry, what discussions have you had regarding the future of cannabis and what it might entail?
Well, there's an awful lot being written about the future of the industry. I mean, that's keeping a lot of people employed in the journalistic field. I mean, I think everybody has an expectation pretty much that nothing draconian is going to happen in this administration that will will halt the progress of the industry. There's just too much money going into state coffers, I think, for that to happen, and I think this train has left the station. But I don't see this administration, certainly with Mr. Sessions running, the Justice Department, to legalizing it on a federal level, which means that the banks will not jump into the business. And so, assuming that we get a different administration in 3 years, praying that we get a different administration in 3 years, it's not going to be the first thing on the agenda, to legalize cannabis. I mean, first of all, I think they're going to want to sort of reverse and do damage control on all the horrible things that have happened. But I think, and most of the people I speak to think that within a couple of years it'll become a priority and it'll be on the agenda. So unfortunately we're probably looking at 5 years before we see any significant legislative change. And most of the people that I know that are fairly serious investors or well-funded entrepreneurs in the business are looking to that date to sell their businesses to R.J. Reynolds or whoever, you know, the tobacco industry, or consumer products companies, and so on and so forth. So, and you know, and I do think that the biotech developments in the business will accelerate, and I think that we're going to see more and more sophisticated medical applications of cannabis. You know, I think it's all a bit generalized right now. You know, nobody knows how to really discern between one CBD oil and another CBD oil, and which one is going to be good for migraine, and which one is going to be good for arthritis, and which one is going to help with cancer, and which one is going to do. So I think that refinement is going to happen over the next 2 to 3 years. I'm very much looking forward to that and to learning more about that. And I think, you know, but that people need a lot of help in being able to understand how to utilize this substance in a medicinal manner to help them with their specific needs. But I do see that we're going to have a huge industry. I mean, it's going to be, you know, $100 million industry in the next few years. It's exciting.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So based on that, and you know, like you said, a lot of people are speculating between 3 to 5 years. The banks won't jump in, so that automatically takes that type of leasing or that type of structured income out. So there are people that have bought or rented different, you know, equipment or ancillary items, machines, but they can't take advantage of those certain tax breaks. Is there a way that they can take advantage of the 280, you know, getting away from the 280E tax break?
I think the question you're asking is if they've already acquired the equipment,
right,
and they've paid cash for the equipment,
yes,
right, and it's sitting on their balance sheets as a capitalized asset.
right.
It's not giving them the benefits in terms of their expenses. I mean, it's hard enough not to be able to write off your employees and, you know, all of the normal operating costs that businesses have.
Right.
I mean, you're allowed to write off direct production expenses. So one of the products that we're developing, we have, and I've done a lot of this in other industries, is we do sale leaseback. So let's say the equipment's been owned for a year or 2 years, we will appraise the equipment, come to an agreement on what its value is, and we will buy the equipment from you and lease it back to you. And then by doing that, you get to start to write it off, which ultimately will significantly improve your margins.
Absolutely. So, although it may take away from some of the revenue that you may get from that leasing option of buying those products, are you in support of federal legalization right now?
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, and I'm very much in support of state regulations, and I think that the regulations that we have are good for the industry, good for everybody. I would, you know, like to think that it will take 4 to 5 years so that some of the companies that are starting to do very well have an opportunity to really grow and become valuable entities, you know, by the time it becomes legal. And that way they get to be well rewarded for the risk and the hard work that they've done, the ingenuity that they've, you know, expressed. So I think the status quo right now is actually pretty good for the industry. I mean, I do understand that on one level it would be nice if the Fed said it's legal, but I think that there'd be a lot of fallout from that. Not all of it would be positive. We're not ready.
Right.
You know, I mean, we're having a hard enough time within the different states and the different attitudes, and even within different cities and the different attitudes, and, you know, and there has to be a more normalization of that, and more normalization of the use of cannabis in all of its various forms. And I think that will be helpful.
So my last question for you. Right now it's already beginning, but in 2018 when everything becomes legalized, there's been a lot of dropout when it comes to businesses, when it comes to being able to be licensed. So there's been a lot of products, equipment, ancillary items, whatnot, that are going up for sale, that people are putting out there on Craigslist and whatnot to do that. Do you feel that's going to oversaturate your leasing business?
Are you talking about secondary market, the secondary market for equipment? Well, we love the secondary market for equipment because it makes us feel more secure. I mean, if there's if there's sort of an eBay, you know, for cannabis equipment, that's really good for us. You know, you know, there hasn't been a lot of churn yet. I've been to a few sites that are looking to specialize in cultivation equipment and seen what's going on, and I mean, I think for a lot of startups, I think it makes really good sense if they can find equipment that'll meet their specs in the secondary market and not have to invest the money. I think it'd be a very good thing.
Absolutely.
And it'd be a very good thing for us to know that if we get a piece of equipment back, that there's a mature market into which to sell the equipment. Makes us feel more comfortable.
Absolutely. Well, thank you, Alan. I appreciate it.
You're welcome.
It was wonderful talking with you. Is there anything else you would like to tell our readers or our viewers?
I think I've covered, you know, the subject pretty thoroughly.
Absolutely.
You know.
And I appreciate your time.
Peace and love, Dave.
Absolutely.
I'll send that out to the world.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much, Alan.
You're welcome.
Pleasure.
Welcome, Brad.